Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026, which means that for more than a year, we've been living under the Donald Trump 2.0 presidency. And it's a presidency that has operated under an ideology and philosophy, if he has one, of I can do whatever I want. He can do whatever he wants with foreign policy. He can do whatever he wants with uh, staff and federal agencies. And at the same time, millions of people have been taking to the streets in protests, millions of people under the simple message, no kings. This hasn't happened just in one city, not just once, but over and over again. Millions of people are showing up across the country to say that we do not want a ruler who governs without limits. And so that tension is why we're here tonight, because the real question isn't just what people are protesting, because there's a lot to protest, but does any of it actually work? We're doing this 1 week before the next No Kings mobilization, No Kings 3.0, they're calling it, which is happening on March 28th. And we wanted to ask the big questions and take stock. Does mass protest actually constrain presidential power? Or are we watching something deeper, a long-term shift in how power operates in this country? I'm Jared Jakang Mayer. I'm a producer at The Lever and the lead producer of our investigative podcast, Master Plan. And we have a new season called The Kingmakers, where we trace the history of presidential power in America and examine how it's expanded over decades across administrations, and looking at the people who were behind this effort that has led us to this moment. So this is a perfect time for us to bring together a group of people that can talk to this. Tonight, we're going to be joined by Robert Weissman of Public Citizen. We have Katie Bethel of Move On, Sarah Parker of the group 5051, and Voices of Florida, and my colleague David Sirota, and host of Master Plan, David Sirota, the editor-in-chief of The Lever. And we're going to kick things off with a talk by Stacey Abrams. So stay tuned for that. And after Stacey talks, we are going to bring in our panelists, and we're going to dig into some of the big questions. What has actually changed after a year of mass protest? What does it take to turn protest into real political power? And ultimately, what comes next for No Kings or for these large efforts to push back on the Trump administration and executive overreach? So we'll also be taking your questions live in YouTube. So if you go into the chat there, we have people watching that. So drop your questions in there as we go, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And let me go ahead and introduce someone who has spent years on the front lines of the fight over democracy, voting rights, and political power in America. I want to bring in Stacey Abrams, author, voting rights activist, and former Georgia House Minority Leader, who's going to offer some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Jared, and thank you all. It is my honor to be here with you and to be speaking with you before the third No Kings March. So I'm assuming all of you have the day written down, March 28th. Draw your signs, bring your friends, bring your children, bring your dog, but make sure you show up. The question on the table today is, where do we go from here a year later? And the answer for me is always the same. The answer is forward. But the question is, how do we do it? And is it really changing things? Yes, things are changing. And no, they're not changing fast enough. And yes, there is a way to make it go better, to make it go faster. There's an amazing panel that will dive into the details, but I want to level set and remind us of how we got here and why our efforts at every level will make a difference. Democracy does not fall in a vacuum. It doesn't erode because people get tired of it. It erodes because it stops delivering, because people feel discouraged. They feel left out and left behind. They think that there's no one looking out for them And so why invest in a system that doesn't invest in you? For many people, that happens over time. And for a lot of us, it never happened. We were fine. We were getting what we needed. And for a lot of folks in this moment, they're still getting what they need. And that's what makes autocracy and authoritarianism in the United States so different than any other place. Yes, it's happened in Hungary and in India, in Venezuela and in Russia. Yes, we have seen it before, but we've not seen it here. And part of the challenge that we face is that we have to know what it looks like in America. I launched the 10 Steps campaign last year because I wanted us to have a bit of a roadmap to know what it looks like. And it always follows the same pattern, no matter which nation it is. But America, it looks a little different. But it always starts with an election. And then you see the expansion of executive power. You see the weakening of the competing powers, a Congress that's inert and, a judiciary that seems inept. You have the gutting of government. It started with Doge, but it hasn't stopped. We are currently in week 5 of a shutdown of part of our government, and things are still moving because they know they can gut government with very little reprisal. Then you have step 5, the installation of loyalists. Yes, Kristi Noem is gone, but Pete Hegseth is still here. Those are people who have no interest in serving the values of America. They only want to serve the power of authoritarianism. Step 6 is that you see them attack the truth, attack freedom of expression, attack the arts, attack journalism. Step 7, they scapegoat minority communities, marginalized communities, anyone they can blame. They scapegoat immigrants because they've got to blame someone for what they've broken. Step 8, you watch them destroy the support systems we're so used to. They attack universities and they go after protesters. And then step 9, they normalize state violence. We have watched the military occupation of 9 American cities, 10 at last count. We have masked paramilitary armed agents still on our streets, still in Minneapolis, and going further and further abroad. They're in Vermont now. And they do all of that because at step 10, what you see happen is the end of democracy. And no, it is not going to require the cancellation of elections. You don't have to cancel elections when you can rig them, when you can redraw the lines in Texas and in Missouri and in North Carolina, when you can change the rules in Georgia and in Florida and Ohio, when you can use the Calais decision to gut the Voting Rights Act, and when you can try to pass the SAVE Act to knock hundreds of millions of people out of contention and off of voting rolls. You don't have to do all of them. You just have to shave some points. Because when democracy fails, it's not because they've canceled elections, it's because they've changed the outcome before we even showed up. But if there are 10 steps to authoritarianism and autocracy, there are 10 steps to freedom and power, and we have been taking those steps. We have been watching our fellow Americans take those steps since day one. It starts with committing to understand what we faced. And that's why I think it's so important that we know what we face, that it's not our imagination. We are in an authoritarian regime. Yes, they have the figurehead of Trump, but there are so many more people who are complicit and who are benefiting from it. And we need to commit to knowing who they are. We need to share what we know. And that's what made Minneapolis such a beacon to so many of us, because we got real-time information, not only about what they were doing wrong, but how we could do right. And they were following the pattern of what they learned from Portland and Los Angeles and Chicago and New Orleans and Memphis and in Washington, D.C., which is still under military occupation. We know that you have to organize and mobilize, which is what No Kings is doing. And so are all of the organizations that are pouring into No Kings and pouring into our communities around this country. We know that you have to do the work of litigating. That's why Democracy Forward and our labor unions and Mark Elias and so many are out there fighting the fights in the courts and winning. Despite the headlines, we are winning. And that's why they keep fighting so hard. That's why they keep not appealing, because they know that the law is on our side. But step 6 is where we are today. We have to start disrupting what they have. Because as much as we want to understand, they have to know we will not stand idly by, that we will not allow ourselves to be lost. And unfortunately, we have seen tragedy follow that decision. The deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, the murder of Keith Porter and those before him. We know that there is a cost, but disruption is necessary. And our job is to mediate our risk, but to understand that disruption can take very many different forms. But disruption means that we cannot abide by the status quo. We have to do more. We have to demand more. Step 7 is that we have to deny. We have to deny them the ability to change our language and change our views and change our values. I spend a lot of time talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why? Because diversity means all people. Equity means fair access to opportunity. Inclusion means respect for belonging. And there is nothing more terrifying to an authoritarian than all people believing they deserve the right to succeed and that they deserve to belong. And so we have to refuse to allow them to change our language and change our minds and keep us focused on what we deserve. And that is that we deserve engagement. And that is why calling and showing up matters so much. It's why the No Kings protests matter, because they're about engagement. They're about showing up. They're about demanding more. Step 9 is that if we have done that, we have to do the elections that are coming up in November. And this is all part of the same network and fabric of action. None of these things can operate alone. No Kings is yoked to what is happening in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is because of what happened in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is why we are necessarily going to have victory in November with the midterms. It is all connected. There are 10 steps. Because if we do those 9 that I just walked through, the 10th step is that we demand the democracy we deserve. And the way we get there is the call to action I have for you today. We have to believe we are entitled to victory. That means showing up on the 28th in No Kings, being present. It's also going to the 10stepscampaign.org and finding the place where you fit in. We don't all have to do the same thing, but we all have to and can do something. And whether that's getting a library card, so you're defending the bastions of democracy that sit in our communities. Libraries are where we can get information and understand and imagine more. It's growing a community garden so food insecurity and the threat to SNAP benefits can't be used to hold people hostage. It's making sure that you're checking on your neighbors, and maybe it's setting up a free clinic if you've got the skills. It's doing what we need to do to show people that democracy can deliver, because democracy is nothing more profound than people in service to each other. Authoritarians hate democracy not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. That a pluralistic democracy that sees everyone and serves everyone is the antithesis of a king. A king wants unilateral power, and his court wants to be able to use that power to their ends. Democracy is about how we share that power, how we loan that power, and how when they abuse that power, we take it back. And so I'm excited about the No Kings protest, but I'm even more excited about the 10 steps to freedom and power. We are on the road to victory. It is a long road. It is a hard road. But if we stay on the path, I promise we will get there. Because when we get there, there will be no kings allowed.
Okay, thank you very much, Stacey Abrams. Thanks so much for joining us and giving us those words. And you can find out more about Stacey's campaign at 10stepscampaign.org. Thanks a lot, Stacey.
Thank you.
And I think what you heard just gets to the stakes of what we're looking at in this moment, because this isn't about one protest, or even about one presidency, in fact. If you're just joining us, I'm Jared Jakang-Mayer. I'm a producer at The Lever. We decided to convene this panel and hold this event because we spent more than a year working on our new season of our Master Plan podcast, our audio and video documentary series. And this series, starting at the beginning of the Trump administration, we decided to investigate presidential power and the people who set Donald Trump up to behave and act the way he has. And let me tell you, it didn't come out of nowhere. And before we get to our panel, we wanted to be able to show you the trailer of Master Plan, because I think that a lot of folks that are going to these marches and are interested in this topic will find a lot to learn about how we got to this place. I know I did. And so the trailer is about 2 minutes long. And then when we come back, we will be joined by our group of panelists.
I have never been a quitter.
Once upon a time, an imperial president was cast out of the palace.
The nation must always come before any
But all the president's men refused to relinquish the throne's power.
president. I must put the interests of America first.
So they went to work rewiring the government. They didn't just take back the controls. They began building something new, something stronger. They gave the president the power to go around Congress to launch unauthorized wars. They ignored the law and cut secret arms deals.
The Pentagon says millions of dollars worth of weapons were turned over to the CIA for shipment to Iran.
They manufactured vast new executive powers for a war on terror.
I would characterize Guantanamo Bay as the least worst place we could have selected.
The Obama administration's continuing a Bush-era policy authorizing the killing of U.S. citizens abroad.
The goal of this master plan was to create an all-powerful president, or as some called it, the unitary executive.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
So when a man longing to be a king took the throne, he inherited unprecedented powers to get his way. And those powers are now turning our world upside down. Welcome to Master Plan Season 2, The Kingmakers, how the presidency was turned into a monarchy. Search Master Plan in your podcast app to subscribe. The new season launches March 16th.
Maybe we like a dictator.
Oh man, that trailer is so good. I love watching it. That is the new trailer for our new season of Master Plan, The Kingmakers, by the great animator Ben Clarkson. And so if you, before we get to our panelists, if you want to find more about that new series, we have the first episode out now. It goes back to the Nixon administration. It's going to be one of 8 episodes that we're going to be releasing over the next several weeks. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on YouTube right now. So if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and you can watch the first episode now and get all the future episodes, and go to masterplanpod.com, to find out more information and details about that show. So let's bring in our panel. We are joined tonight by Robert Weissman, President of Public Citizen, Katie Bethel, Executive Director of Move On. We have Sarah Parker, Executive Director of Voices of Florida and a National Coordinator for the group 5051, and my colleague, David Sirota, Founder and Editor-in-Chief of The Lever and host of Master Plan. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jared.
All right, so we had a lot of interesting questions from folks about the upcoming No Kings mobilization coming up next week on the 28th, and a lot of them centered around this one feeling, this one vibe. So let me try to put it in words right now, and then maybe Sarah and maybe Katie, I'll let you take it first, but it goes like this. It says, you know, we're dealing with this unprecedented presidency, this person that seems to be able to do whatever he wants and get around institutional controls, get around the checks and balances. And I've gone out into the streets. In June, there were 5 million people that showed up out in the streets at 2,000 locations. In October, there was even more than that, estimates up to 7 million people, one of the largest protests in American history. And now we have another protest coming up on the 28th, which some organizers think that will even be larger than the last one. And the question is this: I'm really motivated to go out. I have my protest sign ready in the corner and I'm ready to whip it out. But if I go out again and march in the streets, what difference does it actually make? Are we actually making any headway? Can a popular mass movement like this change the calculations of a particular kind of president like Donald Trump? So Sarah, as a organizer for 5051, who's organized even more protests every single month, what do you say to that general vibe from people that are getting protest fatigue and wondering, what is it all for?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's an important question, and it can kind of be a hard question, but I have an answer. So I've been an organizer for a very long time, since the Occupy movement, and I remember being asked by my friends, well, why are you still sleeping outside? During Black Lives Matter, I marched every single day during the summer. Asked again, why are you still doing this, right? I think sometimes as Americans, we like instant gratification, and the reality is that we're going to have to continue to fight. This did not happen overnight. What we're seeing did not happen overnight. I know to some people it feels like you woke up one day and the world was crashing, but they had taken very maniacal steps to do this. So the work that we do, we have to take small steps. You know, we are on the pathway of winning. We do have some wins, and I think that I really encourage people to celebrate that when you see it. Oftentimes you just skip to the next bad thing, right? You say, like, you'll see someone that was getting deported, they're actually going home. We saw Kristi Noem be kicked out of her position, and then we went to the next thing. So, like, I say that to say, is it immediately going to be different? Are you going to wake up and the world's going to be beautiful again? No, but you can find beautiful in your community. And that's really important, because people are driving by every single day and they may be afraid to protest. They may be undocumented, but they're seeing people in their community are rallying for them. They're standing up for them. And as a Black woman, I've had to fight and protest most of my life, and the people that came before me did too. And the Montgomery bus boycott took 300 plus days. Is it going to be different? We're going to see wins, but we're going to have to fight like hell. And that's okay. That should be an honor, and it should be a privilege, because this is a country that we love, that people we love live in, and we need to continue to fight against it. And we do not cede ground to fascism. As someone that lives in Florida, and people ask me all the time, why don't you leave? We don't cede ground to fascism. And I think I can speak for the other 5051 organizers that are brand new. They were brand new a year ago. These are leaders. Like, I look at them like they look at me. Like, they're all leaders, and they had to start somewhere. And they started last January, and they're not ceding ground. We're not stopping.
And Katie Bethel, from your perspective there at Move On, one question I have is, there was a time in American history where 7 million people showing out in the streets across the country would have had an effect on a presidential administration to perhaps change course. That has almost been the opposite with the Trump administration. And what do you think that has actually changed from some of these events? Can you actually point to things that said this changed the calculus or changed public opinion about what's going on in the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we have to first acknowledge is Donald Trump has the White House, he's bought the Supreme Court, and he has both parts of Congress. He has the House and the Senate. So this is an environment in which we are on defense. We are in a battle for American democracy. And when you're on defense, sometimes victory is just holding the line. Let's look at what we do have still today. We still have our Constitution. We still have the ability to stand up and fight. We still have the ability to go to the courts for justice. Even the bought Supreme Court isn't siding with Donald Trump as much as we thought it was. We have to look at and understand that with as much power as this administration has, including the non-political power, including the power of the billionaires, the Epstein class that is funding everything that this administration wants to do, it's the public outcry that is slowing down the encroachment of authoritarianism in this country. I believe that deeply and truly. And you lose every single right that you don't use. So getting out on the streets, that is an essential component of really standing up for who we are as Americans. Something that gives me a lot of hope as I think about sort of what's different now, what have we accomplished over this last year, is the deep development of organizers and leaders. We have 3,000 events that are going to happen all over the country on March 28th. That's more than we've ever had before. We're going to have more people signing up leading up to the event. That's 3,000 people who are showing up with signs, and they're bringing all their friends. Some of them are coordinating massive city events. We know that that kind of training and resilience and leadership development is critical because we've seen the impact that it has in places like Minnesota, where the resilient infrastructure that was built during the Black Lives Matter movement and before that Occupy, as Sarah was talking about, is now being activated again so people can protect their friends and neighbors against state violence. That's what we're accomplishing with every single fight that we wage. And I love that the question asker was like ready with their signs. My invitation to folks who are thinking, okay, I'm going out with my signs again. What's the next step? The next step is bringing some friends along. It's building those communities of resilience that we're going to need for the next two and a half years of this administration.
Okay, we had a question coming from YouTube from Jeffrey K. Parker. No kings with no concrete demands is an empty, feel-good, liberal waste of time. What are our concrete demands and deadlines? I think that question kind of gets to the heart of the problem with protesting an administration like the Donald Trump presidency, because each passing month there's another thing to protest. We would have thought that this March 28th protest would have been about the ICE overreach and raids, but now we have the war in Iran to protest. But Robert Weissman, how do you take that question? Because this is about the point of protesting is actually to affect change and to grow power, but does the movement lack concrete demands? Do we need to have people focus on a particular strategy?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me join the panel. I think the way you last framed the question starts to answer it. The core purpose at the end of the day of mass mobilizations is to grow power. So we have more demands than we can fit on 1 or 10 signs, right? That's the nature of what we're dealing with this administration. Everything from giant issues about ending funding for the illegal and devastating war that's being perpetrated, to shutting down ICE, to small little things that are super important, like not censoring information about healthcare. No shortage of demands. I don't think the purpose of No Kings is to persuade the Trump administration to see our point of view. I think it's about growing power. And as I think about that, I think it's worth thinking about, like, where were we a year ago and what have we achieved with these No Kings protests? I think where we were at the start of the administration was they did achieve the objective of Russ Vought and Stephen Miller and Donald Trump of imposing shock and awe and fear in the society. And people were scared and isolated and in some sense hopeless. And what the demonstrations did, first hands off and then the No Kings demonstrations, is bring people together and rekindle a sense of solidarity, overcome the sense of isolation, and show people, actually, you're not alone and that you can do something. And the point of each of these is to continue to grow and build so that we have more power. And exactly as Katie was saying, when we do that, it affects how the administration acts. They may not care about our views on the merits, but they do care about politics. And they do change and sometimes stop doing things when there's pressure. But more than that, when we're out on the streets, we're making everyone else, all other sectors, have more spine. So the nature of this chat is going to be highly critical of the Democrats. I'm all there. How are they better or worse? They are much better now than they were a year ago. Is that because they read our policy papers and decided, you're right? No. It's because they saw millions of people on the street demanding that they be better, and it started to make them better. So a few months ago, they wanted to fund and were ready to fund the Department of Homeland Security. But because of what happened in Minnesota, not just the abuses, but the amazing outpouring of people on the streets, they reconsidered, and now the funding is held up. Their instinct is to fund the war, but they're not able to say they're going to support funding for the war because they know what the public opposition is. So we're building something. We've got a lot more to do, but we were already making, I think, across the board, a huge difference.
And David, I have a really good question for you, but Sarah, I know you wanted to jump in real quick on this topic.
Yeah, I just want to add something. Protesting is an entryway. It is an entry point. Coming together in community and then getting more involved in your local community, which is something that No Kings encourages on a regular basis. These are people that, again, have never been activated. There should be groups and organizers and people such as yourself in the chat that have that knowledge to go there and absorb them and show them how there can be difference. Give them the tools and skills how they can be different. We can't do that with 11 million people by ourselves. We need people out in the streets doing that. We think about the mutual aid drives that No Kings has done, or 5051 has done, the education and trainings that are being done on No Kings, the La Migra watches that have come from No Kings and 5051. What's impacting me in Florida, like, yes, on a federal level, it's all the things that are impacting me, but may not impact whatever's happening in New York may not impact me directly. So what Florida's demands look like may be a lot different than what New York's demands look like. It should be hyper local. All of this should be bottom to top strategy. And I think that's what you're seeing. And I understand the angst behind that. But the reality is it's not on us to do that and move them. It's on you. They are out there. They are ready. Move them, engage them, retain them, activate them, cultivate them.
And I wanted to broaden it out a little bit with David. You and I have spent the last year deep in the historical and archival trenches to put together this next season of Master Plan, The Kingmakers, looking back at different presidential administrations and the fights between their efforts to use greater presidential power and push back against that. And as you've looked at this last year of protests like No Kings or people being out in the streets, how have you looked at whether or not those types of mobilizations can have an effect on a president who wants to be an authoritarian? Has something changed about the nature of the presidency that people need to realize as they're trying to push back on this?
So thanks everyone for being here, and thanks everybody for tuning in. To try to answer that question, I mean, I do think that the nature of the information environment that we live in is such that it actually weirdly makes it easier for a president like Donald Trump, or really any president, to ignore lots of things happening. That the attention span, the shortening of the attention span, I think, has helped a president like Donald Trump try to ignore public pressure, protest, demonstrations, and the like. But I also think that it's true, to echo what lots of folks on this panel have said, that the protest itself is a form of stiffening the resolve of the opposition. Certainly. I mean, I certainly think it's true that the Democratic opposition has become much more fortified, much more outspoken, seeing the public outrage and the protests in the street, that has really served to create kind of a domino effect of momentum, a ripple effect of momentum and stiffening the resolve. So I think that's one thing that's been good. I also think it is absolutely true that when there have been egregious examples of overreach, like, for instance, the Minnesota situation, which the Democrats their opposition had a lot of work had gone into stiffening their opposition, and when they put the power of the purse on the table to challenge the Department of Homeland Security's funding. Ultimately, Donald Trump and the Trump administration did somewhat back off. Now, I certainly think the Trump administration will continue to advance its agenda. I don't think it's a permanent stop. We've seen that continue. But I think the reaction, that initial reaction, for them to soften their stance, at least momentarily, shows why this kind of public opposition is so significant. My question is ultimately going to be, after Donald Trump leaves office, and maybe I'm naive to hold out hope that there is that future, but I do have that hope that there is that future. The question will be, where does all of this, what does all of this result in? Because I think what I worry about is that I remember living through the Iraq War and the aftermath of the initial invasion, and when George Bush was in office, there was a significant anti-war movement that somewhat dissipated once the Democrats took over after the Bush administration. And what I worry about is that we live in an information environment that encourages us to think once a presidential election or a national election happens, that everybody can just sort of go back to brunch after the election happens, because everything's been reset back to normal. And I think that actually ended up getting us into the problems that we're in right now. That if there is not a sustained movement to demand real results when the initial emergency is over, it will create the conditions for yet another backlash. And so what's on my mind is not just stiffening the opposition right now to authoritarianism, but also if and when there is a change of leadership, what comes out of this engagement now? Does the engagement remain sustained to actually generate the pressure to deliver real, meaningful policy changes that the larger American public sees and validates as something better than authoritarianism, better than what's going on right now?
Okay, so if part of the effect of these mass protests is stiffening the opposition, like that might be one effect, and that opposition would be the Democratic Party or people in the Republican Party. When people go out there in the streets, though, what does that look like in the near term? Like, where would people on this panel point to say, going out in the streets and getting the headlines might be one thing, but how does that actually channel into things that are going to change the calculus of people in Congress to do their constitutional duty?
Yeah, I can give you a really solid example of that from the fall, where Move On operates, as a large movement organization, and we also, lobby in Congress for important issues. And in the fall, the Republicans cut funding for healthcare for millions and millions of people. That was a huge budget fight. And what we saw was our grassroots members who had been active in the protests in early last year and then in June. Those were the same people who then were writing their letters to Congress that ultimately emboldened the Democratic caucus in the Senate to allow the government to shut down, to take a stand for the funding for the Affordable Care Act. And I think that shutdown was one of the main moments that we saw Congress last year really stand up and fight for the American people. Now, again, in a context where Congress is completely controlled by Republicans, we ultimately didn't win that fight, But what did happen is we had record turnout in an off-year election, in that 2025 election in November, that was voters responding to the fighting posture that they saw coming out of their leaders. So there really is a direct connection between what members of Congress see happening on the ground, how members of Congress are hearing from their constituents, how they're seeing their constituents respond and come together, and then ultimately the political calculus that they're using to decide what issue are we going to fight about, in order to lay groundwork for the policies that we're
So
gonna
you're saying there is a direct connection, but it's not always evident the day after a protest. We do have one question on YouTube that Robert Weissman, I want to direct this toward you. On YouTube, they asked, in Florida, HB 1417 passed. Protesters can be charged as domestic terrorists. Hoping this does not hold back No King participation. What do you think of laws like this and other efforts that the Trump administration has made legally to give more powers of law enforcement to charge protesters and dissent?
Yeah, Sarah may want to add some words about the Florida situation, but the bill there is horrific, and it's being echoed in the federal government with a variety of executive orders and proposals, and a new announcement actually today from the Trump administration where they've invented the concept of domestic terrorist, which they say is targeted on the non-existent mass Antifa movement. But if you look at the definition of what they talk about, what constitutes domestic terrorism, it would include Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, hands down. Like trespass become a indicator of domestic terrorism. So I think it's, on the one hand, super worrisome. It's exactly what it seems like. And by the way, the fact that they are so concerned about clamping down on protest is an indicator of the importance of protest. Anyway, it's exactly what it seems like. I think what we have to do is two things. One, as was the case at the beginning when people were scared, not fall prey to their intimidation, not give in, and make sure that we still continue to mobilize and turn out and protest aggressively. And two, challenge these things legally in court. And we're not winning every case that we bring to challenge the illegalities of the Trump administration. There's some things that are illegal that we're not even able to challenge. Some things where we're winning at the lower courts, and then we get to the Supreme Court and it gets overturned even though it shouldn't have been. I think these overreaches by the Trump administration with these invented criminal charges around domestic terrorism are going to be struck down, and people should not be intimidated about it. We and others are going to bring these challenges, I guarantee you. And it's important that people don't be deterred by the intimidation, which is intended exactly to keep us from protesting.
And real quick, Sarah, on the issue of HB 471, what would you tell people about that particular law, and if they should be concerned about it going forward, going out in the streets?
If you live in Florida, you already know, like, DeSantis is crazy. As someone that went and protested in Tallahassee and spoke against this legislation, it's problematic. And there are people that will be willing to defend you. I know in Florida, if you get arrested for practicing your First Amendment right, you can't, it goes back to exactly what I said earlier, really quickly. You don't see ground of fascism. I'm an American. I was born here. I know that they made me say the Pledge of Allegiance living in the South every single day of my life. That's their own problem. They radicalized me in knowing that I have my First Amendment right. We have to continue to take the streets. That's just it. They started saying things during BLM. We continue to take the streets. Do not let that scare you. And as someone that has an organization in Florida, I can say, yeah, like, it gives me a little bit of anxiety. We even spoke up at legislative session, testified, and was like, is it going to impact us? And they were like, no, it will not impact you. We don't know until they do something, but that should not, the moment you stop fighting is the moment they win. That's just it, you know? And that's when everyone's like, well, I see in the chat, 'cause I'm reading the public chat, that people are like, oh, if this is winning, I don't want to see losing. No, every day you wake up and you fight is winning. Every day you have hope in your heart, you're winning. Every day you say, I'm actually going to use my First Amendment right, you are winning. Because they want you beaten down, tired, and quiet, and they're not going to get that in Florida.
And on the issue of what winning looks like, maybe, if we're sitting here 1 year from now, it's, we've made it to 2027, and the protests have had an effect or not, but what would success actually look like specifically? What should people be watching and doing tomorrow to help set the stage for that down the line? Would it be, are you pushing for laws? Would we see court rulings, electoral outcomes? What would you look to say a year from now, this was successful? Katie, maybe you can chime in on that.
I mean, I think the first big sign of success is that we see leadership in Congress that is in a fighting posture. We want to see that the Congress is responsive, even more so than they are now, to actually slowing down and stopping the encroachment of authoritarianism and all of the harms of the Trump administration. That is the most important victory that we all need to focus on. Leaders who are fighters.
And David, what would success look like a year from now?
Look, I think that's a really good answer. I think that's right. I think that the people who are in power in the alleged opposition need to feel that their political survival is predicated on them being a real opposition. And I think that a lot of us are old enough to have lived through an opposition that hasn't behaved like an opposition. We've lived through a time, I think a lot of us know, that the Democratic Party and Democratic leaders have often been, my favorite analogy is, the Washington Generals to the Harlem Globetrotters of authoritarianism, right? It's felt like the opposition hasn't really existed. And I think the encouraging thing is that I think the public's attitude about the opposition party has provided a real opportunity for the opposition party to be pushed and to be made into more of an opposition. Back in 2007, I wrote a book called The Uprising. And the premise of that book was basically that there was a lot of sort of late Bush administration and a lot of angst about what the Bush administration had done, and that there was a lot of rage in the country, and the rage was going to go in one direction or the other. And it ultimately ended up, I think, mostly being harnessed by the Tea Party and the right, because I think the public still had a significant amount of faith in the Democratic Party and Democratic Party leadership. And so I think a lot of the left of center angst at that time just kind of went into supporting the Democratic administration. And I think now when you look at polls and you see that people are unhappy with the Democratic leadership, it's not just that they're unhappy with Trump and that they therefore like the opposition and the way it's behaved. People's unhappiness with the Democratic Party leadership, I think, has created an environment in which pressing that leadership much more aggressively to be a real opposition is now a really salient form of politics that everybody understands. Now, I wish everyone would have understood it, 18 years ago. I feel like that was a missed opportunity. I think these opportunities don't come around all that often. And so I would really encourage everybody to really listen to our audio series, Master Plan, because it tells the story of how this didn't start just now. Donald Trump is a culmination. Donald Trump is not some magical, pure anomaly who's created this. This is a long-term plan. And that means it's going to require a long-term, ongoing opposition to change the paradigm that everyone, I think, is being educated in real time about. So not to be like overly self-serving here, but I really want everybody to like listen to our audio series to really understand how deliberate a situation we are now living in, and how that requires not just I'm going to sort of engage for a minute and then sort of not engage anymore and go back to brunch, right? Like the engagement is the rest of our lives if we want the real kind of change that is long overdue and that is so needed right now.
And before we ended, I know that we've talked about opposition in Congress, but there's also the courts. And Robert Weissman, this is where I would like your perspective, because as we've seen over this last year, there's been a lot of court cases in federal courts where judges have struck down a lot of Trump's initiatives. But for every one of those, there's another one where the courts have granted him what he wanted. And what do you make of the courts as an institution? And is there things that you're seeing right now that shows that the court is finally catching up to Donald Trump and his strategy of, maximalist everything all the time?
Yeah, I think we can celebrate and also be honest about the situation in the courts. When we and other colleague organizations are suing, we're having a very high rate of success in the district courts, or the first courts where the cases are brought. I think the data is like 80 or 90% of the cases are prevailing in the lower courts. On appeal, it's much more mixed, maybe 50-50. When we get to the Supreme Court, we're losing the vast majority of the cases that are getting to the court. And of course, the court is choosing to take cases outside of its normal process, so it's deciding many more cases than it normally would. So the courts aren't our savior, but we're winning a lot, and we are constraining the administration a lot. Earlier this week, courts just undid the firing of Voice of America employees. We just won a case undermining the effort by Russ Vought to starve the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau of funding. We're seeing lots of these immigration cases succeeding. The illegal effort to deploy the National Guard was actually struck down by the courts. Birthright citizenship is going to go to the Supreme Court, and it's going to be struck down. Do I think the Supreme Court is going to sort of shift? No, I don't. Court is what it is, but it's a valuable tool, and like everything else, I think she's got the 10-point program. One way to perceive that 10-point program is when we're facing this kind of authoritarian regime, and as you say, based on, as this series I'm excited to see, based on a long set of things that have come before, there's not going to be one silver bullet response. We got to do everything. So the courts are a valuable tool. We're going to have some losses that are going to be angering, but it's still part of the tapestry of how we defeat an authoritarian regime.
To close out, I kind of want to go down the line, and if everyone can just identify one or two things that you think that if people were getting involved and sick of just going out to these protests and going home and not doing anything, what would be the things that they should focus on, get involved with, and try to be as specific as possible for people? Sarah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that I think is important to see a lot of people being upset at the Dem Party, and that's 5051, I could tell you we are too. Go run. If you really feel some type of way, go run for office. Go volunteer. 1, 2, La Migra watches. Make sure you're actually getting trained on know your rights. 3, mutual aid. Kids need food. Parents need food. There are a lot of undocumented people who do not have food. They cannot get backpacks this summer. Go make sure that you're getting backpacks or doing something in your community. Get really involved on a deep local level. That is 3 things I think you can do that's outside of just protesting. And then go protest so your community knows that they're not alone.
Okay, Katie Bethel, what are some elements that you would say are things that would actually make a difference in the calculus of power, right, in Washington?
Yeah.
Is it just a matter of being local? Do people need to look at bigger things or other institutions?
Yeah. So joining a local organization is a really critical component. Those local organizations are your conduit to the legislators who represent you in Congress. When a legislator wants to talk about an issue, they call around all the local organizations and say, hey, do you got someone who can testify about this? Hey, do you got someone who can testify about this? It's such a great way to connect that local to the national. I think the other thing, particularly for this audience, hearing about the real concern that folks have, like, is this working, is to really deeply connect with what you're fighting for. This is a country that is built on the dreams of freedom and prosperity. And if you believe in that dream, reconnect with that. Know that it's worth fighting for. And then share the reason you're fighting, what you're fighting for, with your neighbors, and get to know your neighbors, because it's that collective dream that's really going to carry us through to past this fight and into being able to build the future we all need and deserve.
Robert, what would you say?
Complementing those crucial points, three things. One, the administration has just said today they're going to seek $200 billion to fund, escalate, and expand the war in Iran. That is a funding request that we can defeat, and whether we defeat it will depend entirely on how much people speak up. So whether you have a Democratic or Republican member of Congress or senator, contacting them over and over again is going to be vital. This is a totally winnable fight. Two, not just vote, prepare to mobilize around Election Day. Donald Trump is transparent that he aims to steal the election, to rig the election through any means necessary. We're going to have to be ready to turn out all across the country to make sure the election results, or the election is able to proceed, the votes are able to be counted, and the people who win are able to be seated. How do you do that? Both connecting with local organizations and with our national organizations. And third, building on what David said, we have an imperative to do two things, both to deal with the authoritarian moment, but prepare for the after, where we're going to have to demand and win transformative, far-reaching, populist, progressive reforms. We start that work now to win the demands in 2029. And again, it's not by doing stuff on your own. It's by getting connected locally, nationally, whatever organization works for you. By building power together, that's how we win that now and in the future.
And David, any final thoughts on that?
And underscore everything that everyone just said. I mean, certainly running for office is a big one. I think participating in any local organization and combating the old bowling alone problem, I think those two things alone are huge things. I would add to it that any way you can support your local media and independent media, which are both under attack in two ways. Both the business model of these of this kind of work is under attack from big tech, from sort of extractive AI, et cetera, and also is under attack, obviously, Donald Trump and the administration, and its sort of billionaire allies, constantly threatening with legal action, et cetera, against basic journalism, the basic distribution of information. These are entities that are the lifeblood of a democracy, in the sense of having an information ecosystem where people even know what's going on. It's why Donald Trump, why billionaires and oligarchs either want to own the media or shut down and suppress the media they don't like. So any way you can support your local media or independent media. I mean, obviously the Lever is an independent media outlet, but it's not a pitch for us. It's any support for independent media and local media is incredibly important, particularly now.
All right, that is all the time we have for this panel. I want to thank our panelists, Robert Weissman, Katie Bethel, Sarah Parker, and David. Thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks to everybody who watched this session on YouTube. And just know, if you want to know more about the No Kings movement and get involved, you can go to nokings.org. There's a map of events happening around the country. Organizers are actively planning actions, and the next major mobilization is next week, March 28th. And if you want to go deeper on this story of presidential power that is so timely at this moment, check out Master Plan, The Kingmakers. That's masterplanpod.com. The first episode is out right now, and the next episode drops Monday for our premium subscribers. That's masterplanpodcast.com. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.